Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Joe, he's Nick, and you are tuned into the almost world famous, and I say almost world famous, not because we're almost around the world, because we're definitely right around the world, but we're almost famous, and we're definitely infamous. So let's just call us the definitely world infamous Nick and Joe Show.
There you go.
Coming to you live from the Think Radio Broadcast Centre here in Canada's national capital. And we have in the studio tonight with us Chris Frasier, who has almost become a regular on the show. And Nick's in the studio, too.
I am.
So welcome, Chris.
Great to be here, Joseph.
And okay, so lots of stuff to talk about. It's been a very busy week in the news. So just before we get started, let's do our housekeeping stuff, our normal housekeeping stuff. First of all, if you are listening to the live show and you want to participate in our chat live with other audience members, just click on the chat bubble or the comment bubble in the live player, if you're listening online, that is. If you happen to be listening on the radio, through terrestrial radio, regular FM or AM radio, whatever, I guess you're out of luck. You can't participate in the chat room. But we're actually working, give us a few weeks, and we will be starting to take some phone calls, probably live phone calls. So buckle up and get ready for that. Anyway, back to the chat room. You have to click on the bubble. Mm-hmm. You may have to register. If you haven't registered, or you may have to log in if you're already registered, and that's just to ensure that you're a real flesh and blood human being. If you're listening to the podcast, you can still leave a comment exactly the same way. So we welcome the comments, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. I was struggling. I should have brought in some water or something. My mouth is already dry, and it's only 2 minutes into the show.
We got a long 2 hours, if that's the case.
I know. Okay, so listen, I don't know where to start. I guess we have to start...
we should introduce our guest. Oh, we did.
I did.
Yes, that's true.
I did. We're going to talk, Chris, you got to stick around for the last half hour of the show, because we're going to talk a little bit about Chris's new show that he's been working on. That's going to be live pretty soon.
I heard him do a couple episodes today. Yeah, really intriguing stuff.
Very interesting stuff. But so that's what we call in the business a teaser. So make sure you stick around.
That's a trailer. That's what that is.
It's a teaser trailer.
I like it.
A trailer teaser.
We're teasing people with a trailer.
Yeah, and I do have a piece of advice. Never argue with a poplar log when you're rolling it over on a sawmill.
What does that mean?
That means I crushed my finger today. Last week. Yeah.
I think you talked about that too last week.
Did I?
I did.
Was I complaining about it then too?
No, you didn't. It was just one of those. I think you were you've been left out of the victimhood.
Yeah, and I wanted back in.
You're feeling sorry for yourself because
I wasn't a victim.
You haven't been a victim.
That's right. Well, that sawmill made me a victim. Boy, that hurt. Anyway, so don't do that.
No, don't.
No.
It definitely is something that you have to be a trained well, not necessarily a trained expert, but you have to know what you're doing.
Well, yeah, that's true in a lot of things, but especially when working with high-speed steel that's very thin and got a lot of teeth.
Okay. The last few weeks we've talked a lot about China.
Yep.
And we've even touched in previous weeks about the rise of the new Russian Empire, let's call it that, and the return to such aggressiveness from the Russians that we haven't seen since the old Soviet Western Bloc Cold War.
Since about the 1980s, yeah.
Right, since about the 1980s or 90s, I guess 80s, 90s.
Yeah, because the wall came down in 92, right?
80, 87, 89. It came down in 89.
It came down. Oh, that's right, because it didn't collapse. The Soviet didn't collapse till 92.
92, that's right.
I was mixing up my events.
But what we haven't talked about, which actually is an important, I think, issue in that part of the world, is the what can only be described as rogue behavior of the country of Belarus. And this week, they took it to unprecedented levels.
They sure did.
When they diverted a flight from Greece to Lithuania that happened to have a journalist on board who has been outspoken in his criticism of the president of Belarus. And so they succeeded in diverting this flight, landing in, I guess, in Minsk, which would be the capital of Belarus.
Yep.
And they dragged this guy off the plane and then allowed the plane to go on its back, finish its flight. And he's been incarcerated now. Now, I don't know if we're in touch with him or anything like that, but this is really, talking not just about a rogue country and rogue behavior, but, this is gangster behavior.
It absolutely is. The story is, let me just let people know, for those who don't know, what happened was the leader of the country of Belarus is what they call the last European dictator. His name is Alexander Lukashenko. Okay, and he's been described as a brutal and erratic leader supported by Vladimir Putin from Russia. He was after a guy by the name of Roman Protasevich, who was a co-founder of the Telegram channel that's a popular opposition outlet in Belarus. So this guy's been after the president, quote-unquote president of Belarus, really vociferously, like he's not letting up. And finally, the leader of Belarus had enough and sent a MiG-29 to intercept this Irish commercial jet. Now, a MiG-29 is a pretty heavy piece of military hardware. And when you send one of those up, you mean business. So the Irish, it's Ryanair is the name of it's the Irish carrier.
Correct.
Had no choice.
Right.
I mean, what are they going to do? Outrun it? Good luck.
Yeah, no.
Although they were mighty close to the border, the
countries in that part of Europe are pretty small. So
it's not a huge.
Once you cross over into the airspace of one country, you're pretty close to crossing out into this airspace.
Well, they were on the verge of that by looking at the map that I've looked at.
Right.
But if it's a map, and who knows how accurate that map is, but
still,
as far as the MiG-29 pilot was concerned, he was given clear and direct orders to make that airplane do a U-turn and land in Minsk. So he parked it on the ground for 7 hours, dragged this poor guy. I don't know if he's a good guy or a bad guy, but he's a journalist. And they drag him off. He's been incarcerated ever since, and I'm sure he's enjoying the hospitality of a Belarusian jail, right? And all the amenities that go with that, the great food, the wonderful vistas, and all that stuff. I'm being hugely sarcastic, of course.
No, we couldn't tell that, Nick.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure that he's enjoying his salt fish and glass of water a day. Anyway.
Schmaltz herring.
Schmaltz herring. That you're absolutely right. That's what it would be. Anyway, so he takes on this it's turned into an international fight because all the Western democracies, including Canada, have condemned it. Now, the thing that I found interesting about this, and I'll shut up here in a minute and let you guys jump in on it, was Prime Minister Trudeau came out and he said, this is an attack on free speech. This is an unjust assault on civil aviation, and we can't have this, and all that kind of nonsense. And I say nonsense, not that I think that his words were wrong, but I think they ring a little hollow in light of Bill C-10, okay? And if you really look at some of the things that go on within the world of civil aviation, he didn't really care much about that either, because he's making leaded fuel harder to find. They want to strike it from the available fuels for the civil aviation fleet, which includes some old warbirds and engines that run on leaded fuel. Now, you could put all of those engines in a bucket. It's not like you're in the old days when everything ran on leaded fuel. This is a tiny fraction of the total fuel burned every day in this country. It's not an environmental threat, in other words. And yet, it doesn't matter about history, or it doesn't matter about vintage aircraft or none of that stuff. He doesn't care about that. So when he stands up and he makes these kinds of comments, I'm left scratching my head going, is he actually being a real world leader, or is he just a hypocrite? And to that, I have no answer. So you guys jump in.
Well, I'm just going to, and Chris, you have to really muscle your way in
I'll
here.
muscle my way in.
That's why I decided to take a break.
Going, but I just can't let the occasion pass without making the observation that even in the case of Belarus and this brutal dictatorship, a thug regime, a gangster regime, a rogue state, essentially hijacking civilian aircraft so that this president, who doesn't like a journalist, could get at him. And Nick, only you can find a way to turn that into a criticism of Justin Trudeau.
It's not. See, if I thought he meant it, okay. If I thought he was being sincere,
I'm not criticizing your criticism. I'm just making the observation that here we are talking about what people could very well argue is an act of war. Well,
the Irish might take that attitude.
Well, I don't. That's funny. I don't know that they have, but I'm not sure what the Irish are doing about this. To be honest, I haven't really followed it up very closely.
I don't think the Irish really have much of an air force they could send after
you don't have
Belarus.
to, but I would say that at a minimum, and this is where I think Canada again could play a leading role. My question is, why have we not ejected from this country already the diplomats, Belarus and
Belarus is closing its embassy here in Ottawa.
Are they?
Yes.
Oh, see,
but that's not because we kicked him out. That's because they decided to leave.
They decide because they can't take the pressure
from Justin Trudeau,
Canadian government.
This reminds me of the saying that goes, "Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely."
Well,
and this is one of the reasons why we need to pay attention to international stories like this, because it's very easy to say in North America, "Well, that's terrible. What's happening over there? It could never happen here." We shouldn't be so smug and willing to say that. I don't expect anything like that to happen anytime soon in Canada, but give politicians a little bit of power, even in a democratic country like Canada, and you never know what could happen. So I see stories like this, and I say, well, that could be 20 or 30 years away from here if we don't protect democracy and protect our freedoms.
Well, even the term democracy is misunderstood.
Yeah.
It used to be you elected people to represent you and your best interests in the House of Commons. And they would do even the unpopular in order to further that agenda. Today it means mob rules. And there's a big difference because the mob can change its mind in a heartbeat or in a relatively short period of time. Things that used to be obviously just plain dumb now are embraced as the height of wisdom. And you can look at a dozen different examples of that. But the point is that you have this, I'm all for democracy. I think it's the best system ever devised by the mind of man, as flawed as it is.
Right.
It's still the prettiest girl of the dance. But it does have its flaws. And when people start thinking that they understand what democracy is because they get what they want from the government, that's always in the short term, because what does the government want in return? There's never no strings attached. It's like my dad always said, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Somebody's paying for it somewhere. So it's the same thing here. If they give with one hand, they're taking away with the other. And people have forgotten that or never knew it in the first place.
And just remember, it's only 2 or 3 weeks ago that a pastor in Canada was arrested in Calgary on the highway.
In solitary confinement.
Dragged away, put into solitary confinement. If I showed you that video, if I could have gone back in time to 2 years ago and say this is going to be Canada in 2021, you would have said, don't be ridiculous. That could never happen.
Yeah, well, it did. And he was laying on a concrete floor with 1 hour of sunshine a day like a double axe murderer.
Yeah. Even if it was only for 24 hours, that is still a message.
Matter.
It doesn't matter. You're right. It's like the fact that actually happened.
Because